As of the day this video is releasing, it has been exactly 1 year since the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the ascension of her son, Charles, to the throne. In the immediate aftermath of her death, many in the media wondered what kind of sovereign Charles would turn out to be, after waiting more than 70 years to be king. But for me, I immediately began thinking about what kind of king I had already watched him be. Not in the real world, to be clear, but on stage. Mike Bartlett's King Charles III is a 2014 play that depicts the first few tumultuous weeks of Charles's reign following his mother's death, and the thorny question of what the purpose of the British monarchy is in the 21st century. Billed as a future history play, the script is written in blank verse that mirrors Shakespeare's own histories, with the tantalizing detail that it centers on the characters of Charles, William, Kate, Harry, and Camilla. I actually saw this play twice during its string of US regional premieres in 2016, so when Charles became king, it was one of the first works of art that came to mind. That is, of course, besides the other work of art featuring the British monarchy that I was researching at the time. Yeah, in an odd quirk of timing, my full show commentary track of the musical Diana was recorded 1 day after the Queen died. So go check that out if you want to hear about the fun rock musical version of the British monarchy, because Bartlett's play is nothing like that. And, unlike Diana, which became available for licensing this year, it's unclear what the future holds for King Charles III, both the man and the play. Mike Bartlett, speaking to The Guardian only days after Elizabeth's death, said, "It might be worth watching the filmed version which is available to stream now, as I doubt it will be performed again for quite a while." So in this video, we're looking at the post-Queen play in a post-Queen world. Does it have a future? And what kind of future could it have? Quick clarification, as Bartlett mentioned, a television adaptation of the play was filmed for the BBC in 2017. In the absence of any filmed productions of the stage play, that will be the footage I'm using in this video. But make no mistake, we're talking about the play, not the film. Firstly, for the uninitiated, let's quickly run down a plot synopsis of Mike Bartlett's King Charles III. As the play begins, Charles, having just become king upon the death of his mother, is presented with a bill from Parliament, which will crack down on freedom of the press in England. Called to sign the bill into law, a largely ceremonial act that is nonetheless required, Charles disagrees with the bill and reserves assent, a thing his mother never did. This throws Parliament into chaos as they scramble to convince Charles to stop voicing his perspective on legislation, but he's resolved to have an active role in the government. Meanwhile, Prince Harry, as the spare to Prince William's heir, falls into a relationship with a commoner named Jessica, who quickly identifies his discomfort with being a prince and begins introducing the idea that he could leave the monarchy if he wanted to. He pushes back against this, but doesn't stop considering it. With the fight between Parliament and Charles now becoming public, and William refusing to step in and mediate between the two, the Prime Minister introduces a new bill that would remove the need for royal assent on laws. But before it can pass, Charles exercises his power as king to dissolve Parliament and call for fresh elections, which throws England into full-out riot mode. And while this is happening, explicit photos of Jessica end up getting leaked to the currently unregulated press, which the monarchy, not supporting her relationship to Harry, refuses to stop. By the end, Kate convinces William that if he doesn't step in, the monarchy could end before the two of them become king and queen, leading to a plan of undermining Charles and convincing him to abdicate the throne. The idea being that William and Kate, as the more popular, less ambitious couple, would better serve to provide the stability to the country that Elizabeth, during her reign, represented. After being threatened with total familial abandonment, including from Harry, whose relationship to Jessica Charles was among the only people to approve of, Charles agrees to step down, lamenting that the monarchy under William and Kate will be purely ceremonial once again. While some general knowledge of the real royal family could be expected in 2014, the play succeeds as a drama independent of prior knowledge, drawing on familiar Shakespearean tropes. The question of what role the monarchy should serve, as it shares power with Parliament, is the major thrust of the play, with Charles holding desperately onto the older ideal of kingship that he grew up with, and the younger generation more willing to serve as ceremonial heads of state. Both Harry and Kate explore the question of how much of their private life is owed to the people. For Harry, the privacy he experiences with Jess is engaging enough that he seriously considers leaving the plush public privilege of his family.
And why would I want to be free of it?
Because you hate it, don't you?
But for Kate, who has eyes on her crown already, the ability to serve as a powerful yet understated influence over politics is worth the cost of her private life.
I ask no less than power to achieve my will in fair exchange for total service to the state.
That tension between public and private is also wrapped up in the debate around the press bill. Charles, who has lived his entire life in the spotlight, and who lost his first wife to the pressure of the press.
What of the pack of wolves that mercilessly did hunt to death your late and much-missed wife?
That's bold, so soon in our relationship.
Views the abuses of bad press as something of a necessary evil, and fears that the bill will suppress good journalists. But for Jess, who has been suddenly catapulted from anonymity to infamy by her association with Harry, the personal costs of an unregulated press are too much for her to bear, a position which further supports her pitch to Harry that he could leave the monarchy, and, by doing so, leave the eye of the public. In a smaller way, there's also Mr. Evans, the leader of the opposition, who publicly speaks out against Charles's reserved assent, but privately encourages the king to speak his mind. However, it's left unclear whether this is because Mr. Evans supports Charles's perspective, or is just using the king as a tool in his opposition to the prime minister. No one in the play can agree on quite what the role of the sovereign should be, until the end, when everyone is united in one perspective: it shouldn't be Charles. That's all what the play communicates before you start adding on the real-life details of the House of Windsor. Bartlett's greatest coup, aside from the excellent verse writing, is in finding fictional actions for the characters that are rooted in the personalities of the real people depicted. Before he took the throne, the biggest concern in comparing Elizabeth to Charles was the latter's willingness to speak out on a variety of political issues. While Elizabeth, as the play states, often gave royal assent to bills which she fundamentally disagreed with, Charles was caught up in a scandal in the 2000s, the Black Spider memos, that directly stemmed from his attempts to influence politicians, and a lack of neutrality that the royal family typically expresses. So it's not a far leap to imagine that once on the throne, Charles's background as a meddling prince would lead to a constitutional crisis like the one in the play. Harry, as well, has his subplot rooted in true discomfort with the monarchy. As the spare, Harry has long had to live under the constant eye of the press, without the promise of becoming king at the end, like his father and brother. This perceived unhappiness gets taken to a logical conclusion in the play. When Charles suggests bringing Jessica into the royal family, Harry rebuffs him, saying that what he truly wants instead is to leave the royal family himself.
I'll have no role official and not prince. I'll live a life of normalcy.
You would not be a prince.
I'd be your son.
Similarly, watching Jessica be hounded by the press, just as Harry was in real life, only compounds his desire for freedom, though his relationship to William, two brothers who promised their late mother to look after each other, further complicates the notion of stepping away from the monarchy. What's most structurally fascinating about the play is the way it inverts the traditional method by which Shakespeare turned history into drama. While Shakespeare certainly played fast and loose with history himself, his plays were written centuries after the lives of the kings and queens depicted in them. As such, while the plays are beholden to follow the true events of history, Shakespeare's characterization of the players has little basis in the historical record. Audiences watching Richard III would know about the events of the play, the murders and the convenient marriages, but the play could delve into the psychology and motivations for those actions more clearly than a history book could. Conversely, public knowledge of the Windsor family is rooted in emotions. In the absence of any grand actions they've taken, their personalities are what the public knows about them. Maybe these personalities are, to a certain degree, constructed by the media, but their veracity isn't as important as their tenacity. More than being true, they exist as archetypes that people hold onto. To that end, Bartlett extrapolates fictional actions from those public personalities, giving his play a sense of plausibility for those versed in the drama of the royal family. Even if these events haven't happened, there's a pervading sense, maybe even a lurid hope, that they could. By the time of the play's premiere, the notions of Charles as an unstable meddler, Harry as deeply unhappy, and William and Kate as bland but likable were jumping off points for a play that imagines how those archetypes would act following the death of the Queen. But characterization, unlike historical fact, ebbs and flows over time. So now let's look at how the current public view of the royals cuts against the play differently, now that its premise has taken place. I'm not going to get bogged down in the factual inaccuracies, as that's more of a distraction. We know that Charles did not actually suspend Parliament, and in the past year has managed to keep his personal opinions close to the chest, like his mother.
It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply.
William and Kate did not push for his abdication, and while there has been drama in British politics in the past year, it has not been rooted in conflict between Parliament and the monarchy, but merely Parliament itself. However, if we're talking about the turning point when the play's story and real history began diverging in a way that was irreconcilable, it wasn't actually the moment when Queen Elizabeth died. It was this.
This is the key bit. They go on to say, "We intend to step back as senior members of the royal family and work to become financially independent while continuing to fully support Her Majesty the Queen." And they also add that this geographic balance will enable us to raise our son with an appreciation for the royal tradition into which he was born, while also providing our family with the space to focus on the next chapter.
Harry's relationship to Jessica is both the play's most correct and least correct prediction. Leaving aside the surface-level similarities, Harry did fall in love with a non-white commoner with an artistic background who was subsequently hounded by the press to such a degree that the pair wanted to leave the monarchy. There are exchanges between the two in the play that sound eerily prescient for a play that premiered about 2 years before Meghan and Harry met for the first time.
Yeah, but I can't do this with my life.
Why not?
It's not what I was born into.
Then change it.
The true dividing line between the motivations of the real royals and their fictive counterparts comes in the conclusion of the play. As mentioned, Jess asks for the monarchy to protect her from press attacks and is refused. But later, when Harry explains these attacks to Charles directly, he is immediately on board with bringing Jess into the royal family. Given Meghan's recollections of how she was received by the royals, this may be a far cry from the actions of the real Charles and William. But the play's biggest missed shot is how it ends. After Charles's abdication and William's ascent to the throne, Harry is pressured into breaking off the relationship to Jess, on the grounds that William needs the royal family to project stability, and can no longer allow Harry to walk away, as Charles did.
So King can tell you who to love and what to feel. The King is dictator of your heart.
My heart was made by King.
Again, Harry's own stories about how strongly William argued against Harry and Meghan leaving are illustrative here. William even twists his reliance on Harry into a ploy to trap him earlier in the play.
With this new perspective, I'd only seem more trapped. By this, the family.
And if our father's crisis blacked as shadow more, I hope that I can turn as I've always done to you.
On one hand, this isn't quite the same situation as occurred in real life. Harry and Meghan left while Elizabeth was still queen, not amidst the fallout of a messy kingship and abdication. But the notion of Harry as willing to prioritize his family over a romantic partner got very publicly proven wrong, in a way that certainly casts a shadow of implausibility over the scene today. This, writ large, is what damns the play in the post-Elizabeth world. It has lost its veneer of believability. Sure, for those that know nothing about the royal family, the play still holds up as a drama on its own terms. But for a general audience with some baseline knowledge of Harry and Charles, the play's greatest marketing asset has become its greatest artistic liability. This future for the Windsors no longer exists. This is one possible path that could have branched off from the version of them that existed in 2014, and it's not the one history took. It may have some continued interest if framed as a fully alternate history, asking audiences to forget the real-world royals, but the amount of subsequent history audiences will have to ignore makes it questionable whether the play is worth that amount of mental effort. This is yet another case of all theater is marketing, all marketing is theater. If you ask audiences to disassociate this King Charles from the real King Charles, despite the constant volley of details tying the two together, why even bother calling him King Charles? And if you're like, well then change all the names, well, maybe that could work, but at that point the play is so fundamentally different that you've basically rewritten it, a discussion to be had in a video that is not this one. So we return to the question, is there a future for this play? I mean, nothing is preventing people from staging it, and as of this video there is at least one production planned for this coming October, so in practical terms, yes. But to close this out, I do think the play could regain the popularity it had in the 2010s. It just might take a few more kings to get there. The end of King Charles III has William and Kate ascending to the throne as symbols of stability, the pretty plastic picture of the monarchy that Elizabeth was and that Charles refused to be. But audience understanding of that conclusion is, of course, contingent on that being the case. Currently, it's not disprovable, but in the future, when Prince William does become King William V, we will be able to prove that ending true or false. Maybe his reign will be blandly uninteresting, as Bartlett predicted, or maybe they will be more of a meddling presence than expected, or caught up in scandals that cut against the stability they represent in the script. Restaging the play in 2050, how will the audience's changing view of William and Kate affect how the abdication reads? Is it a necessary coup or a self-serving bargain? And even more imminently, if Charles does get into a more meddling mode during the later years of his reign, could the play be seen as prophetic in that regard? With the royal family being well enough known that some general knowledge can be expected of most audiences, the show's impact will continue to evolve as the public knowledge of the royals shifts and changes. It may be a hard left turn to change all of the names, but what about staging the play in 100 years, when the names of the characters don't immediately bring to mind their real counterparts? Could the play have the longevity of Shakespeare's histories, whose real-life inspirations were already mythologized by their premieres? The specificity of details like the James Hewitt paternity rumor or Charles's own whatever love means quote, both of which are mentioned in passing, could fall to the wayside, like so many cultural allusions in Shakespeare's works now cut or adjusted in performance. The universal messages of political squabbling and class tensions will survive the test of time. Perhaps the most undersung aspect that led to the play's success in 2014 was that it didn't just take place in the era of Elizabeth, it took place in the era of almost post-Elizabeth. Her advanced age meant that thoughts of her death were already being considered, and the idea that it could happen any day now gave the play a sort of added believability. Depending on how the monarchy evolves, we could see that specific circumstance arise again, a long period of stability marked by a fear of upcoming uncertainty. The play, as fable of that change in epoch, would have renewed relevance. Ultimately, as Charles himself says in the play, imagining the kingship he could have can be more exciting than actually living through it. A thought that holds for the man himself and for Bartlett's play.
Potential holds appeal, since in its castle walls, one is protected from the awful shame of failure.
Will King Charles III be remembered as consequential, or fall into obscurity after its time passes? The question, for both play and man, can't be answered just yet. But the answers provided by Bartlett will always be there for our consideration.